My ambition. That's me trying to be normal. Hello, everyone.
Wow.
I was
Do you know
really
what?
expecting like this. Yeah.
I like the not normal version more, I think.
My
I
ambition.
normally
My ambition.
yeah, that's
My
better.
ambition. That's it. Oh, Christy, yes.
I think, let's stick to what we're good at, and that is
Yes.
being a little bit off the wall. So
Yeah.
hi everyone, it's my ambition.
Hello. My ambition.
It's us as usual. Tiffany has totally thrown me by being so serious there. It's Alex.
I was pretending it didn't work. Back to normal.
Oh dear, funny. Right. So, hi everyone. We've got a wonderful guest for you today. We've got Christy Lowry with us. So, she trained as an educator of the Gottman Institute's Bringing Home Baby program. She's a fair play facilitator and a retained parental leave coach. She's got expertise in grief and loss. Christy helps parents confidently navigate their parenthood transition. She empowers parents to intentionally define their experience, embrace all the roles they play, nurturing the person behind the parent, and finding their footing at their own pace to experience more joy and fulfillment along the way. She's also a mother of 3. Welcome, Christy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Yeah, and I secretly love the fact that you were whooping it up as well.
I know. I was like, I wonder what kind of intro, because I've listened to the pod and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I love how fun you are at the start of your podcast. And then yeah.
We've definitely cornered the market in weird, I think.
Someone had to.
Honestly, like I that is something that I love to tell my kids. I'm like, the more weird you are, the more you're gonna find your friends. And the more you'll be you. You just be you. Don't dim that light. Don't dim that light. So
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's how we found each other as well, by just, letting it be out there.
yes, we do. Yeah.
Definitely,
Yes.
definitely. So I think a great place to start, Christy. I think when we spoke, I don't think we kind of went to this in more detail, but it'll be great to hear a bit about your background. I know you transitioned from a 15-year marketing career to obviously being a parenthood expert. It'll be interesting to hear how that sort of came about.
Yeah, definitely. I am a recovering corporate marketer, I guess, in the full working parent mode, going into entrepreneurship and coaching and business ownership. So, but yeah, I had my first child 7 years ago. He'll be 8 this year. Time flies. It goes by so fast. I can't believe we're halfway done with his elementary school, and it's just crazy. But yeah, I've been in marketing, both agency side and client and corporate side. And after I had my first son, it was hard. It was really hard that first year of parenthood. It was hard in just the postpartum phase, the maternity leave phase, the expectations that I felt in multiple different ways. My marriage was challenging. Getting back into work was challenging. My maternity leave that first with my first child was 3 months. And so which is much different in the US. And also 3 months is still very amazing, especially 7 years ago. So so I'm very grateful for all of the time that I had, and on the other side, my husband didn't have any. So he took 2 weeks of PTO and then he went straight back. But after that first year, and then also going into my second child, my daughter, I learned a lot between the two, right? The two experiences of parental leave at work, kind of the conversations that we had to have. But, a year after my first son was born, my husband and I, we were not doing well. It was breaking. Our communication was breaking. Our connection was breaking. Our intimacy was breaking. It was just breaking. It was very difficult. And so we kind of had this come to Jesus moment, I guess. And I realized how difficult things were for him, and he realized how difficult things were for me. And I think from that point on, we realized like what the expectations externally are on us and the roles that we think we're supposed to play and what we're supposed to do, they aren't working for us. And so we made a decision to kind of reevaluate, like, well, what does work for us? And I think that was kind of the biggest pivotal moment in, I guess, my early parenthood journey of just redefining what actually works for me and not taking on those norms and those traditions and what was modeled, because I couldn't keep up with all of it. I had both, my mom was a very ambitious, career-driven person. And then my husband's mom stayed at home and cared for the home and the kids. And so it was a very different dynamics. And both of these, I felt like I had to do both of them to be good and to be that motherly, ambitious, like exactly why you have your podcast name, Ambition. I had to show that in so many different ways. And so did my husband. My husband was struggling as well with his mental health, with his physical health. And so, so when we went into our second child, I was still working in corporate. My husband was also working in corporate. And I just said to myself, like, it has to be different this time. I prepared, I planned, I communicated. I had everything figured out, I felt like, my second time around. And it was still drastically different than the first one and incredibly challenging. Like, different challenges, different kid. I got told that many times. And then, of course, you get told all of this information, and then you actually go through it and you're like, oh, I get it now. Like, I get it. And so that's actually when, after I got back from my second maternity leave, then we went into the pandemic. I had a six-month-old when we went into the pandemic of 2020. And and so I spent, let's see, that was crazy. I mean, the shifts that we had to do in our marriage, because we had a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old at home full time because daycare's closed, everything closed, right? Like, parks closed down. But I remember doing this like spreadsheet, and we would meet every morning and we'd go through our schedules and, and all that kind of stuff. And I know I'm getting into the weeds, but it's just crazy how much you then had to work together because you were both working from home. You had the kids full time, very small babies, trying to figure out all of this stuff, not knowing what life was going to look like, and then also needing and wanting to like enjoy the time, because as a working parent, when you're gone, all these, these full days, there is, you don't have that time. And so all of a sudden, like, my kids were at home, I had time with them, I wanted to utilize that time, but I also needed to work. And so when we got back from the pandemic at the end of, end of 2020, early 2021, I actually took all of this passion and this like fire in my belly to do things different, and this need for change into my workplace. So I created, I initially wanted to just do a group for moms and expecting moms and new moms in that first year. And then it kind of didn't have a place
we might
in the company. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay.
Oh,
We lost you a bit there.
Yeah, we just lost you for a second, but
No
I think it'll catch up.
okay. So then it didn't really have a place. And so I ended up creating and founding and kind of strategizing a parents and caregivers employee resource group at the company. And so I launched that. We had a committee. We had different resources for parents and caregivers. We worked with the benefits team to kind of change those policies and those benefits and increase care for the caregivers at work in a hybrid way, in a at work way, in an at home way. And then with my third child, I went on maternity leave. We had a lot of personal things going on. We were moving, in the process of moving, in the process of selling a house. And that maternity leave was chaotic, but I knew what I was doing. And that's actually, I was also doing my retained parental leave coaching certification on my maternity leave.
Oh, wow.
I was like, this is a great time because I'm in it and I'm going to, grasp it more. And then also, like, I forgot that postpartum, my brain doesn't work as well as when I'm not postpartum. So, that was good and chaotic and wonderful. And Center for Parental Leave Leadership has a fantastic program for parental leave training. But then, yeah, I got back from maternity leave. The day before I was going back to maternity leave, my mom actually had a stroke. And then 2 weeks later, she passed suddenly and very unexpectedly. And so as I was coming back from my maternity leave, being in that postpartum phase, I was already feeling, you know, before my mom died, I was already feeling the effects of postpartum depression and anxiety. And with my mom's death, that exacerbated everything. And so I ended up coming back for about 2 months to work, and then uh, ended up taking a mental health leave because I needed to kind of take a break from work and focus on the things that mattered, and grieve a lot of things. And I had a lot of realizations after that. So that is, I think that's where a lot of my passion comes from. It's a lot of lived experience. There is, obviously I'm a coach and I love mentoring and coaching moms and dads and couples through the parenthood transition. The one thing that I'll say about the parenthood transition is that it is way longer and more complicated and full of many changes than we give ourselves credit for, and grace and self-compassion for, right? So that is one thing, especially in the US, where I feel like we have this conditioning and expectation to be ready to go at 6 weeks, or like back into normal at 6 months. And that is just absolutely untrue. We are not,
really, isn't it?
it's impossible. And our bodies aren't built on industrial time. We're not built on 8 to 5. We're built on horticulture time, seasonality.
I think we spoke about that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the idea of
Yeah.
like bouncing back and how toxic that is.
Yeah.
Because so much changes when you become a parent. And I'm so glad that you highlighted some very specific things there, Christy, about, how your personal experience shapes your professional mission, because I think that's actually such a powerful transition. And even, I mean, we have an upcoming episode with a guest called Gina Miller, who's very well known in the UK. But, that aside, she's someone who's achieved some incredible things in her life. But I think what we really learned from her story was the fact that everything she did externally was actually, it all started off her personally, advocating for her child. And I think this is a message so many mothers need to lean into. If we allowed our personal experiences to really shape us and to, I suppose, let it move us to action in a way, then I think we would find something beautiful. But also, I think what you touched on there about grief, because you're already going through postpartum and then interjecting grief into that, I think that's very unique.
And
So,
we talked as well, didn't we, the three of us before, about how the transition of birth and grief are kind of intermingled a little bit, that some of the emotions you go through for when you have a baby are a bit like grief anyway. The kind of loss of yourself, I guess the denial for a bit at first that things aren't how you expected them to be. Is that something you could touch on a bit more, Christy? Because we were talking about that
I would
yesterday.
love to touch on that a bit more. I could talk about that for days. And I know you were also doing your own bit of research on it and your own bit of thinking on it. And I think it's so good, and it's such an insight. The amount of grief that we are going through as we transition into parenthood, as we go through life. I mean, there are so many points of grief, stages and phases of how our kids grow up and when our kids grow up and the different milestones they make, or the changes that we go through just in life and our womanhood, right? But the realization that I had between my postpartum experience and my postmortem experience after my mom died, and that grief, I realized that I didn't grieve my pre-parent or my non-parent self. And the similarities between grief and mental, maternal mental wellness and health and mental illness and postpartum depression and anxiety and rage, there are a lot of grief symptoms that are depression, rage, anger, relief, anxiety, this yearning for what was, but not able to have it. And I think postpartum is the same thing. We are losing so many things that we're not recognizing. We're losing our time freedom. We're losing, our independence, our full autonomy over our bodies. A bit with, whether you decide to breastfeed or formula feed or however you're feeding your baby, but they are on you, and there's a sense of loss of that physical self and autonomy. The the need to grieve, though, is still there in postpartum, and trying to find a way and a time to do that so it's not so heavy. I think you kind of have to go through postpartum phase, but then go through your grieving and your identity, and it's a lot related to your identity, right? This shift into mom overnight. You get the title of mom overnight, but you don't feel it. You're not embodying it yet. You're still feeling a lot of questions and whatnot. But going back to grief symptoms, I think that was my biggest aha moment of just how am I feeling? How is this post-traumatic growth after my mom died so similar to what I experienced? And there are physiological brain changes right after you have a baby. And there are physiological and brain changes after you go through a big loss. And there are two different types of loss categorized. And so it's shadow loss, which is loss of things in life. And there's physical loss, which is loss of life. And so understanding that there are these two things, and we're constantly losing and changing, all of the things that we have in life. So the loss of things in life are all of the things I just mentioned in postpartum, but you're also losing who you were. You will never be the same after you become a mom. And you will likely never be the same after you lose someone who is your person or that you're very, very close to, right? Especially a mom.
I remember listening to a TED talk about how and it was reinforcing this idea that you don't move on from grief, you move forward with grief. And I thought that was interesting. And also there's this idea that a lot of people, when they lose loved ones, obviously it's hard to have a conversation, a lot of people say they are actually quite traumatized by the fact that people don't talk about it, but they want you to talk about it. So I think it is quite hard and awkward, isn't it, sometimes? But I'd love to actually, what do you think about that, Chrissy? Because I think, what about if we have friends and family members who have recently lost someone? What do you think from a perspective of someone who's experienced that, maybe, not so recently? What do you think about this idea of people talking about it? Do you think we should? And how should we talk about it? Ask how
Yeah.
you are. And yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I do. We have to.
Okay.
There's so many reasons to. It's up to the individual who's grieving,
Okay.
though, right? If they want to talk about it, if they don't want to talk about it, if they want to talk about it in a certain way or a certain environment. So taking that person who's grieving, taking their lead, but always in the back of your mind, my mom and Tiffany, I think, I don't know specifically your experience with losing your mom,
Mhm.
but she's always there. She's always there. And just knowing that and having that understanding that even if it's not going to hurt me to bring her up or ask how I'm doing personally, and it never has since she died. And so bringing it up and saying, hey, I know it's a hard day, or I know this season is really difficult. I'm here. I'm here to talk. And honestly, the things that I do and that were done to me that I appreciate is just the quick check-ins. Hey, I just want to check in with you. I want to talk about what you're doing today. Just the simplest kindness and loving kindness. Um, from a grief standpoint and silence, though, trauma when we go through something and we're alone and we're silenced, that's where we get trauma, when we're going through something alone, right? So grief can become traumatic. Loss can become even more traumatic when we are silenced, when we don't talk about it, when we don't get those things up and out. You know, I've had some up and out sessions with my clients where it's just this release, this venting, this I need to be heard and validated. And there's also a lot of things we don't want to forget. If we're not talking about those people that we've lost, we lose bits of them. We lose the stories, we lose the clarity, and over time that will happen. But the more we feel safe to talk about those things, I do believe that we should. And yeah, does that answer your question?
Oh, it does. Thank you.
That's really helpful to me as well, as someone who hasn't lost a parent, but I know plenty of people who have, and I feel like grief is something we are all going to experience sooner or later. And understanding how to support friends, other family members through the inevitable is really helpful, because I think people do feel awkward about it. They don't know, they don't want to upset the person, so they think, oh, it's better not to talk about it. But actually, you're denying them that opportunity to talk about somebody they love, aren't you, if you don't let them share what they want to? So yeah, that's been really helpful to me.
I think that's a really good. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and actually, very quick, Chriselle, because I think this segment is probably quite useful for any mothers who's listening who has lost a mother themselves and now trying to mother. So I think this is probably something worth talking about. I mean, I have, but you know, for me, because I lost my mom when I was young, the impact was that I didn't really have like a blueprint for mothering. So actually, my ambition has been a good way to learn from other mothers and actually see what other people are doing that I could do more of or do less of, right? But it'll be useful to understand as well how losing your mum as maybe impacted how you mother now. Is there something or practice you have with your children or any approach that you take because of that experience?
Yeah, definitely. When my mom died, so many priorities shifted
Okay.
of what was really important. Um, the clarity of what's important, the purpose of my time and how I spend it became very clear. And I think that's another reason why I'm doing the things that I'm doing, because it's so important to not only be in community with other people, but share those things that you've been through so they can learn. Because, Alex, you're exactly right. Everyone's going to go through grief, whether it's now or later in their life, whether it's the loss of something or someone. It's going to happen. And you know, having those people and community around you to support you, but the purpose and the clarity of what's important and the priorities with mothering, you know, I show up in the ways that I want to show up with my kids a lot easier. I have a lot more patience and loving kindness towards them, and with them. I look for when they are grieving and when they're sad, because it's really important for them to be able to express all of their emotions. And so we give space to those things. And I do my own, I have my own grief groups that I'm part of, whether that's creative or mindfulness or somatic. And so I bring those pieces into how I parent. So when they're having these big emotions or they are grieving, I look to my own personal practices of, well, maybe we need to journal. Maybe we need to draw something. Maybe let's paint. Maybe let's do yoga. How do we process this grief and these emotions and let our body and our minds metabolize what we're feeling right now, so then we can process and move forward with, you know, how our life experience. And so, you know, a quick example that I can think of is that, and it's a simple, silly one, and it makes me tear up every time I think of it. But my son lost his first tooth, and we did like the whole thing with the the string on the tooth and the doorknob, and I was afraid that the tooth was actually going to like come off as I was tying on the thread and whatnot because it was that loose. But this huge celebration. It was a first tooth. It was great. And then later that afternoon, he was just sad, and I could tell he was kind of more reactionary than he typically is. And so I asked him, hey, what's going on? This isn't like you. Is there something bothering you, or just trying to understand where he was? And he was sad about his tooth, and he was sad that his tooth wasn't going to be in his mouth anymore. And and
That's adorable.
the loss of things, the loss of things. And so he wrote a picture, or he wrote a letter to the tooth fairy, and he wrote a letter to his tooth, and he drew a picture of his tooth, and he folded it up and he put it in in his little like tooth pillow, and and he was better. Like he was happy for the rest of
Allowed
the
him
day.
to process it. Yeah, you allowed him to process
Yeah.
it because of your experience.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just, I think he realized that, oh, he could feel this way. There was permission for him to feel this way. And also, I don't think unless you have someone point it out, or unless you're aware of grief, that you're really recognizing what it is. Like, I'm just feeling sad. I don't know what it is. I'm going to keep moving forward. And that's a big piece of, I think, motherhood in addition to grief. But motherhood, I have felt in my own, and I know my clients have felt this need to be productive and like move forward and be grateful and go towards the next thing, and kind of not sit with what just happened, or the stage you just went through, the phase you just went through, the year you just went through, right? And not doing that doesn't allow ourselves space and time to grieve. And so, if our grief isn't seen, I've personally experienced and know from all of the books that I've read and all of the podcasts that I've listened to on grief and motherhood, but grief really demands to be heard and seen and felt. Because if it's not, then it manifests itself in different, potentially unhealthy ways.
One of our friends is doing a series of exhibitions that you might be interested in,
yeah.
actually.
Oh, yeah?
Shout out to Laura Bedford McDonough, whichever
Oh, right.
combination of surnames you're going by. But she is working on, so she's based in Leeds, but she's part of a project called Projecting Grief, and they do exhibitions where people have shared their own grief stories. It's really cool. It's kind of been around a few different places in the UK, but there's stuff online for it as well. And that is just giving regular people the opportunity to voice their grief and tell their story about what happened to the person that matters for them. So we might get Laura on to talk about that at some point, but if she'll agree to come on.
You know what? I'm enjoying it. I'm actually really enjoying this episode because I talk about death a lot. And I think that's just because of, kind of losing my mum. I can't, I think when I lost my mum when I was 9, and I think I don't know how I dealt with it because I can't remember, right? But I think since becoming a mum, I'm much more aware of it now, because also I'm a similar age to where my mum was when she died, and I now put myself in her shoes, and because of that as well, just like you, Christy, I'm much more like aware of time, aware of the blessing about being a mum, because I could be gone tomorrow. And just and also I have this sense of urgency because of my mum. I know she was ambitious, and I know there's so many things she would have wanted to do but didn't do. So because of that, it does give me this kind of perspective, which sometimes I don't want to have, because I'm quite just like that. Like life is so fleeting, and it really sticks with me, and it's but it's been also useful. There's a book I read. It's called Someday. It's a children's book, actually. It's a beautiful book. It's absolutely beautiful. And it talks about how it's a mum talking to a child, how she looks at the child as a baby, then the child becomes a toddler, and then she talks about the child growing up and leaving the house. The house that was so big one day will be so small. She talks about the child experiencing grief, joy. She talks about the child leaving home. And she talks about one day, I see you, brushing your child's hair just like I brushed yours. And one day you'll have silver hair, and then one day I'll be just a picture to you. So, and my kids, I read this book to
Are
them.
you trying to make me cry?
I know. But I think, I know. Well, I just think, it's just the reality, and I think we sometimes
Mhm.
forget that because we're so kind of tied to, we're so busy that we forget that our time is short. And it's about kind of finding purpose or finding something to do that's useful. And I think in itself, even motherhood is just as good as anything. And I think sometimes even that message gets lost in society, right? The idea that even being a mum, it's enough, right? It's in itself a big role. It's in itself a worthy cause.
I feel like we should throw out the word just when we're talking about motherhood, because
Yeah.
it's crazy how something that is so all consuming, you know, you were talking at the start, Christy, about the difficulties that you go through, the reality checks that you have when you suddenly so sleep deprived and fighting. You know, I never fight with my partner.
Yeah.
We have a really like happy, friendly relationship where we could, like, even if we're starting to sort of niggle with one another, we end up laughing. During that sort of postpartum period, I honestly must have Googled divorce a million times, because I was just
Yeah.
like, I felt angry at him that he got to sleep more than me, and that he like got time where he went to work, and all of these things that I expected to be this little blissful trio of three people, and it's really hard. It is
Yeah.
really hard, and I think you told, you know, the people who can look back with the rose tinted glasses of time and say, "Oh, enjoy every moment." You then have that guilt on you as well
Yeah.
of
That
like,
you're not
I'm
even
not
enjoying
enjoying
it.
every moment. I'm really not.
I'm tired.
I'm really
I'm not
tired.
doing
I'm not enjoing it.
it.
And what are you meant to do with that? It's very lonely. It's very isolating. And we treat motherhood as though, oh, you're just a mother. And we were talking about this with Gina Miller the other day. She was like, "There's no just about it," and I really took that on board. I
Mhm.
think we need to throw it out.
I
Sorry,
completely
I'm
agree.
on my I'm on my soapbox
Yes,
now.
No,
I
but it's
love the
true.
soapbox.
And actually, tied to what you just said there, Alex, I think that's a good place to get your insight on as well, Christy. Kind of relationships, because relationships change right when you become a parent. So it'd be great to understand that, because I know that you've implemented several kind of relationship practices with your husband. So I'd love
Mhm.
to, give you a moment to share some with us. Let us take some tips from you.
And just
Yeah,
before you do, I'm
no,
going to say, I love you, Eddie, in case you're listening. Like, sorry about that.
Shout out to Ade.
Over to you, Christy.
yeah, no, it's completely normal and common though to be in such a place of strife and struggle and
Mm,
triage mode in the first 3 years of like your kid's life. It's a
yeah.
lot, and it's again, it's completely you are completely changed. Your I guess understanding of how you've completely changed is constantly evolving over that time. But yeah, as a couple, um, gosh, there's so many things that you both are going through. The relationship is changing. You as individuals are changing. Um, there are so many expectations of what we should and shouldn't do, how we should look, how we should feel by a certain time. It's like I said
Mm,
before, it's this horticulture time versus industrial time, and we are built on due dates and clocking out and um, uh, you know goals and all of these things, right? These very static things, but we are actually physical human beings. We are animals. We are connected to the earth. We flow in cycles. We live in cycles and systems and habits. And so I guess that is one big thing that I had to realize, and we had to realize, is that like trying to stick with a timeline and do all these things and be very rigid and inflexible was not what was actually working for us. The I guess the really big aha moment that I had, and I like to relate relationships and the home a lot with running a business and also being in there's a lot of business practices that we can take into the home and help us have more success, right? But there's also a lot of things in our home with empathy and emotional resilience and mental resilience, um, and compassion that we can bring into the workplace and become more understanding and patient with those rigid expectations. Um, so I like to better understand and kind of work with my clients to understand how they're innovating. And I think the permission to innovate your relationship like you would your career or like you would yourself in a professional setting, right? You in a professional setting, when you're working, you're like, yes, I want to learn this new thing. Yes, I want to grow. Yes, I want to ask for new opportunities. Yes, I want to be the, I want to get to this top. And it's not always money motivated. It's like personal value and worth and those kinds of things. But oftentimes I'm not seeing this translate into the home where with couples, I would say on both sides, where they're like, no, this is my expectation. This is my expectation. And they would rather be right than have the connecting relationship. And so when we're bringing these things in, it's, well, how are we willing and what permission are we giving ourselves to innovate our relationship? Because it needs to. You are not the same people that you married. You might have like core pieces about you and your interests and those things that you still find wonderful and your humor and personality traits. But you're changing in so many different ways, right? So how are you innovating? How are you doing what's right for you? A lot of the work that my husband and I did early on, about 5 years ago, we started this, was really looking at values, our beliefs, our vision. So how do you get to your individual core values of what your North Star is, and what is really guiding you and who you are inherently and what you look for, what you believe in. And then also those beliefs about those values. So sometimes we have this value of family, and family is important, but our beliefs about that family and what that family should look like and what my role is in that family are completely different. So while it's great to align on values, it's really important to align on beliefs. And so communication and having those conversations is where you're going to really where you're going to get to know each other on a whole new level as you become parents. I've noticed that a lot of times we get stuck in our what was modeled to us and our gender norms and the traditions that we've seen in our own family systems or our partners or friends and what they're doing and how successful they're looking or being, you never know. But just because it's working for them doesn't mean it necessarily works for us. And so having those conversations of what's working, what's not working, how did you experience me this week is a great question to ask each other, to really and also listening as with open heart and ears, knowing that you're in a partnership with this person, you chose this person, you care about this person and their interests and what they feel. Hopefully, if you don't, then there's more work to do. And maybe
I
that's
love
where
all this. No, I love all this
therapy
kind of
comes in. But
intentional kind of reflecting on our relationships. My husband calls me love, live, and laugh because I'm so like, oh, let's do this exercise, let's do this topic. It's like, woohoo. um, and someone bought us this card, it's like a couple cards.
okay.
Someone bought these cards, and it's really, really interesting. So he asks very quite deep questions, but and it's sort of like questions about your childhood, and I like all that because I think in a relationship it's quite easy, like you said, especially when you have a children and a family, to kind of life is busy, everyone's just kind of trying to survive, and so
Mhm.
I think I actually like the idea of kind of stopping once in a while to kind of check in or like get to know each other a bit more, ask those kind of difficult questions. But it's good to really know, because I think sometimes it's just this. I feel the pace of life can sort of can get so busy
Mhm.
that we're not being intentional. We're not stopping to think or get better or kind of talk to each other or really look at each other. So I quite like this intentional planning. And also I think at the end of the day, if we're gonna, as ambitious mothers, our environment plays a key part. So
Yeah.
if you have a chaotic home or something that's really difficult to deal with, it can affect whether you pursue your goals or you don't. So I actually like the idea of thinking about the foundations for our relationship and how that can help us as mothers, as women, as, whatever other roles that we play to thrive. So thanks for sharing that. So you guys,
Yeah.
your weekly check-in, what else was it?
Yeah.
I know
So we do
you.
a weekly check-in. We actually do an annual summit as well, where we take a full
Oh,
day
lovely. My
and we
husband will
kind of,
love that.
yeah,
We will
yeah, no,
summit.
it's coming. Yeah. So, and that, again, that's what we did 5 years ago. And
Okay.
it wasn't just an annual summit of like, yeah, what are we doing and what are our goals? It was like, no, let's write out. Can I curse on this podcast? Or not? Or no?
You
No.
can, yeah.
Go for it.
It's it's the stuff we do. I would
Okay.
say an expletive versus stuff, but it's the stuff we do list. And that is where we started of like, oh, both of us are feeling so overwhelmed and there's so much to do. And then you start getting resentful because there's so much to do. And then you get into this partnership loop of, okay, well, what are you doing? And what are you doing? And here's the schedules, and here's this doesn't work. And can you reschedule that? And it's just this back and forth, and then you become coworkers. So you
Okay.
have to get out of that. You do have to pause, like you were saying, Tiffany. You have to pause at an individual level, but also with your partner. And so yeah, we do this annual summit. We talk about skills and strengths. We talk about inputs, which is self-care. We talk about outputs, which is the stuff we do list. We categorize that on a weekly, monthly, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. Because if I'm holding all of the daily stuff, well, that's not very fair. And there's, that's where fair play comes in to kind of help see the mental load and the emotional labor with all of these daily, weekly, and monthly tasks. Um, and then we also talk about, values, vision, and really get clear and try and like really visualize like what age are our kids going to be? What are they going to be doing in 1, 3, 5 years? And so that has been the constant the past 5 years. And I will tell you, we are where we want to be, from what we started 5 years ago. And so it is this practice of remembering, putting your priorities in place, understanding what each other feels good doing. That was the other thing of when do I feel valued is what was also what we talked about. And what do I enjoy doing? And so matching, just like you would in work, right? You wouldn't take a job that you weren't actually enjoying. You wouldn't take on tasks, well, most of the time, that you didn't enjoy or that you didn't have some level of skill and strength at. And so why aren't we taking these practices and putting them in our home? Why is it so often, and there are statistics on this, 75% of the home and the care fall on moms, 25% fall on dads. The majority of tasks, doing it, physical labor, cognitive labor, emotional labor, falls on moms. There's one thing that men, based on research, own more often than women, and it's trash. It's just
I
taking
knew
out
you
the
were going to
trash.
say that. I do that quite a lot.
That's true. That is. Why is that? Why? Because
Right?
I find myself doing that as well. Like being like, you have to take the bin out. You're taking the bin out. We call it bin in the UK. You're taking the bin out.
I do the bin. I do the bin, and I catch
Oh.
spiders as well. I'm the spider catcher in our house.
Oh gosh,
I've
you're
got
like
some
super
non-traditional roles in my portfolio.
Yeah. I love
Love
it.
it.
Bravo. But yeah, talking about these things helps you understand where one your bias is, and it might be unconscious, but then also really aligning to that strengths based and equity in your home, right? You don't want to create this list and be like, you're doing 50% and I'm doing 50%, because that's not real. That's not actually true, because what will happen is that the daily 50% goes to the wife. And yeah, and again, I do want to say, a lot of the couples that I help and a lot of the research right now is on hetero cisgender couples. And so that's why I'm talking about men
Yeah.
and women, specifically husband and wife. But yeah, the weekly check-in, the framework there that I follow, that I love to follow, because I don't want to get stuck in this partnership loop. I think so often couples have a check-in and they only talk about schedules. They're not talking about friendship. They're not talking about what was fun. They're not talking about what they appreciated and what they're grateful for. for the entire like existence of the relationship, unless it's a fight, of feeling like you never appreciate what I do. You don't see me, unless it's an argument, and in that argument and in that moment, any sort of gratitude or kindness comes across, it's just lost. You're not absorbing anything. So when you have these weekly check-ins, it's 4 letters, it's team. Um, for obvious reasons, you're a team. So it's touch. So holding hands, making eye contact. If you are feeling tense, you can just like touch feet, or you can like cross fingers, or you can hug and then separate. But it's this element of reconnecting physically and co-regulation. E is educate. And so it's learning something. And so when I'm working with couples about fair play or shifting dynamics and roles and responsibilities in the home, we talk about a task. So this is a time for you to educate your partner on a task that you do or a task that you would like for them to do, and vice versa. Or how is it going, right? And be very vulnerable there. Or you could talk about narwhals and what you learned about narwhals. It can be whatever you want to talk about in the educate space. The appreciation is appreciation. And so we like to do, and what I recommend is at least saying 3 things, not just the doing, but also the effort, and appreciating the effort that went into the outcome. But then also asking, I thank you for saying, or oh gosh, sorry, I'm like trying to think of how I framed it. How did I say everything you want to be appreciated for, or is there something else that you need to hear appreciation for? And just let that other person speak, because sometimes, like, thanks for saying the 3 things. You said the 3 things. That's great. I feel like a burden for asking you for more. And then there's no opportunity for an invite to tell me what you actually are holding resentment. And resentment does creep in when we're not feeling appreciated and seen. And then M is for metrics. And it's, how are you experiencing me this week? What can I do better? This is the schedules. This is the coordination. This is, more tactical, practical stuff too.
Wow, I love all this because I think sometimes I kind of think back to like my mum and dad and their relationship, and I just kind of see a lot of relationships kind of just existing, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I think again it's just this idea that something significant changes when we become parents, and we do
Mhm.
have a lot less time for each other. And I'm always conscious about the fact that, just reconnecting and that idea of preserving your relationship with your husband, because your children do become your priority. And I think sometimes your husband or partner kind of takes a back seat a bit. So it's interesting to kind of have, I suppose, just be a bit more conscious about what we can do to improve or just come back to each other a bit.
I've written
Mhm.
it while you were
Yeah.
talking, Christy. It's like, sounds like it's about not just letting life happen to
Happen.
you. Like, you're not just letting the relationship happen. You're actually putting in the effort to
Mm.
make sure that you are maintaining it. Because, if you thought of it in the context of like a friendship, if you never speak to a friend or send them a message, that you end up drifting apart. But then
Mhm.
we don't think about we sometimes don't think about our most or one of our most important relationships in the same way, and that is when people become like roommates or colleagues,
Mm.
and the only reason you're together is the kids. So I feel
Yeah.
like if you don't do this, you're kind of on thin ice, aren't you, for when the kids no longer
Mm.
need you or are at home, because
Yeah.
then you
Yeah.
don't know this person anymore that you live with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, Alex, is
Mm.
the curiosity to understand how your partner's growing. Not only yourself, but how is your partner changing or evolving or not? Why is that? Like, what can we do to get on the same page? Because ultimately, we are growing in some level and capacity, but we don't want to do this. We don't want to grow separately. We want to grow at least going towards the same um, direction, right? I mean, even with careers, it's it's this like okay, you're staying level this year and I have an opportunity to get a promotion. So I'm gonna go. Like, and you're gonna maintain the status quo. Or hey, I'm having a really hard year emotionally. I need you to maintain because I need to go like do some work here. And just you're not gonna know that. And you're not gonna be able to plan it unless you're having these conversations. And you both deserve to have these conversations and you both deserve to have a good, happy, genuine, respectful relationship. So, yeah. And obviously, a self check in is always good too. I do a weekly self check in, just like I do a weekly marriage check in. But that is, Tiffany, you were saying earlier, to pause, to really reflect of what's working, what's not working. A lot of moms that I work with, and I know I felt myself, if I'm not making this progress and I'm not feeling productive, um, I'm not feeling like I'm good enough. And that can bring us down really fast. I'm feeling guilt for not doing something that I mentally told myself to do, but physically and feasibly, I couldn't actually get done. And we don't give ourselves breaks for those things. Like the amount of social highlight reels we see, and we're like, oh, we should do that or we should have that. But you're just taking on that expectation without understanding, like, well, they probably worked really hard for that, or it's just on social media and it doesn't
Yeah.
actually.
Or they've got some help.
Or they have the help.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
I was thinking
So,
about that today because my husband's away, and I physically have the children. I'm waiting for the grandparents to get here, but obviously I need to work as well. So I kind of got to the position I thought I can't work. Like I'm feeding, I'm changing nappy here and there, and it's just they're there and we're playing. So, and I think you go to spend more. And I realized that I think when you become a parent, you do have less time, and I think it's the acceptance of that sometimes, and not and accepting that you have less time, and that's okay. And you just have to, obviously, like you said, just kind of think about what you want to do, or you're going to accept that you have less time, because I think sometimes you kind of feel like you can continue with the same energy that you did pre-parenthood, but I don't think
mhm.
that's possible sometimes, because you physically, I mean, for example, when they're quite little, you are physically changing nappies, you're feeding, you're chasing them, it's quite physical. And I think it's about just embracing this idea that things have changed, and then moving forward with that in mind.
For me, it's all about the seasons. That made a big
Yeah,
difference to me, of thinking like you're in different seasons,
yeah.
and made me think it's not going to be forever.
It's not going
We
to
can
be
get
forever.
to the next
Happy
season.
with change, change with
Yeah,
passion.
yeah.
What do they
It
say?
feels like
Change is as good as a rest. You move on to the next season and you're like, woo, glad that one's done.
uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's really hard not to get into triage mode when you're, again, like the first 3 years of just doing what is in front of you and then moving on to the next. It's like you're in what are those manufacturing like product lines?
Mm,
You're just focused on doing this and shoving it aside and then doing the next thing and shoving it aside. And, when are you taking time to pick your head up, and really realize, or like, elbow your partner and be like, hey, lift your head up. This is crazy. What are we doing? How can we find some calm in the chaos and margin? This idea of margin, and creating this space in between that is full of nothingness, and it's just time to breathe and sit and lay down and rest. And this idea of rest is just, it has to be earned, right? Do you feel that way? You can't rest
Yeah.
unless you feel like you've done enough. Yeah. Yeah.
mm,
And so sitting down and literally, I like to set timers for my grieving practices, my self-care practices, but also rest. And so resting or journaling, like literally laying down and set a timer for 5 minutes and just sit and stare up at the ceiling and watch the fan and see how much it takes your brain so long to
mm.
not do something and to
Yeah.
just look at the fan or look at the ceiling and look at all the crevices in the ceiling
Mm.
and just rest. And you're not thinking about anything else. But it's only 5 minutes.
I know, but it's crazy how hard that is. I'm recently, and I think Alex will talk about this as well. I recently read Essentialism, the disciplined art of doing less,
Yeah.
and I really in that phase of life now when I'm taking that in, this idea of you can slow down and you can be much more intentional about what you're doing. And it's okay to almost do less things, but as long as you're doing them well and you're doing the things that you really want to do. And I think sometimes for a over ambitious, anxious person that I probably am and was, that's really hard message to accept. But I think that's what life's about. It's just moments of pausing, isn't it? Taking it in and being present and looking around and just being.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And my mind goes to the value of time and how we value our time. And I think we've been told to value our time only if we're being productive and worthy to someone else or to
Oh, I feel
something
like
else.
it's a very capitalist message, isn't it? That we're like,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
You do
No,
feel
go
like you
ahead.
have to earn
Go hard.
rest.
Yeah.
You do feel
Yeah,
like that.
I do.
I definitely rested more when I was like a student and I didn't have as much to do.
What's the value to anyone? Exactly.
Come back.
Oh gosh, yes, I yearn for those days, and at the same time, I'm like, no, I don't want to go back there. No responsibility sounds amazing, and also no money doesn't sound.
Yeah. I'm definitely doing the rose tinted glasses of looking back at a student.
I remember African parents, they will say to you, and I do mind is a devil's workshop. So yeah. So that always kind of scared you off in late. You're like, oh my God, the devil's
Devil's after me.
Like that devil makes work for idle hands. Like we're all being brainwashed into like just get on with it, just do something all the time.
I think so. But yeah, we'll wrap it up. But thank you so much, Chrissy. I think thank you for just this kind of much more calm episode. I think it's been very kind of reflective. It's touched on some obviously heavy topics, but I think somebody listening will definitely get some value from this.
Yeah, for sure. Really, really enjoyed it. And, we've laughed a lot for having talked about grief so much in this episode. And I really wish that I could take your advice and go and rest right now, but there's no rest for the wicked, unfortunately.
That's another one. That's another phrase about rest that is so unproductive and not useful, but we've just internalized it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah,
thank you so much,
both of you. Yeah.
Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much.
everyone. We'll see you on the
Bye,
next
everyone.
one. Bye-bye.